A cop mocked a teenager in court, thinking she was just a law student. He had no idea she was the attorney about to end his career. Nobody in that courtroom took her seriously the moment she walked in. Not the bailiff, not the gallery, definitely not the cop at the witness stand, already leaning back like this was just another boring shift in a long week. But Amara Hayes didn't care. She pushed the heavy courtroom door open at exactly 9:12 a.m., her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. She wasn't late, she was timed. 3 minutes early, just enough to walk in without rushing and still make a statement. Black Converse, charcoal slacks from a resale app, a faded navy blazer with sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her box braids were pulled back into a low bun, neat but casual. No makeup, no jewelry, no attempt to look older than her 20 years. She carried a thick binder under one arm, no laptop, no flashy briefcase. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the binder, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to do. "Court's in session," the bailiff called. Judge Harrington, silver-bearded and old school, sat up straighter on the bench as Amara passed the bar. She took her seat at the defense table without saying a word, unfolded her binder, flipped to a tab labeled Sullivan Cross. The other attorney glanced over, confused. "Ma'am, this table's for counsel." "I am counsel," she replied without looking up. A pause. Wait, you're the one handling the cross today?" Amara looked up for the first time, calm eyes, no attitude. "Just facts, yes." Her voice was steady, but inside, her heart raced. She knew every eye in the room was judging her youth, her outfit, her existence here. He looked her over again, not sure whether to laugh or be worried. Before he could respond, a voice from the witness stand broke the silence. "This some kind of student court program?" That came from Officer Thomas Sullivan, white, late 30s, arms crossed, the kind of guy who wore mirrored sunglasses on cloudy days. He chuckled, turned to the court officer beside him, and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "What is this, debate club?" His smirk widened as he added, "Did they lower the bar exam age to 16 or what?" A few scattered laughs from the benches. Amara didn't blink. She clicked her pen once, wrote a single note in her binder, her jaw tightening as she scrawled his words verbatim, and waited. "Let's proceed," Judge Harrington said, clearly unsure whether this was a prank or some kind of legal TikTok stunt. But Amara stood. Her voice didn't waver. It didn't try to sound deep or older than it was. "Your Honor," she said, "defense is ready to proceed with cross-examination." A few eyebrows rose. Sullivan leaned back again, but this time he narrowed his eyes like maybe this girl might have something up her sleeve. "Go ahead, kid," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for the front row to hear. Amara walked toward the witness stand, not rushed, not stiff, just steady, like she'd done it 100 times, even if this was only her third time doing it in open court. She felt the weight of every stare, every snicker, but she channeled it into focus, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. "They'll laugh until you make them choke on it." "Officer Sullivan," she said, "you've been on the force how long?" He smirked. 21 years. "Great," she said, flipping through her notes. "That means you're familiar with standard protocol during routine traffic stops, correct?" He raised an eyebrow. "Obviously." "Good, because I'd like to walk through one, specifically the one involving my client on June 14th. The courtroom shifted. People sat up. Sullivan rolled his neck like he was stretching for a workout. "You mean the guy who ran a stop sign and got mouthy?" Amara nodded. "Yes. The man you pulled over at 3:42 p.m. near Elm Street, who you said, quote, was acting twitchy and argumentative, that one?" Sullivan smiled again, this time smug. "Yep, that's the one." Amara stopped, looked him dead in the eye. "Did you have your body camera activated during that stop?" "Of course." "Was the footage submitted to the case file?" "Yeah." Amara turned to Judge Harrington. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'll be referencing the officer's own footage in my line of questioning." The judge gave a slow nod. "Proceed." Sullivan shifted again, but not because of discomfort, not yet. He just thought this would be over quick. "This ought to be good," he muttered, his voice dripping with condescension. But something in the way Amara flipped the next page in her binder made the entire room lean in, and Officer Sullivan was about to realize he wasn't the sharpest person in the room anymore. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it felt like it. People started tuning in, not out. Phones were away. Even the defense co-counsel leaned back and crossed his arms like he was watching a movie he didn't expect to be good. Amara stood at the podium, flipping through her notes, not to waste time, but because timing mattered. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that this wasn't just about her client. It was about every person who'd been dismissed like she was right now. Officer Sullivan, she said, you stated in your report that the driver failed to stop at a stop sign. Do you recall writing that? Yep. And the stop sign in question is at the corner of Elm and Cedar Lane? Yeah. You mentioned you were parked facing east on Elm Street when you noticed the alleged violation. That's right. Amara nodded, scribbling briefly, then turned to Paige. You also remember stating that the intersection was clear when you initiated the stop. No obstructions, clear daylight conditions, low traffic. Correct? She stepped to the side, holding up a printout. This is a still from your own body cam footage, timestamped at 3:41 and 49 seconds p.m. It shows your car facing east with two SUVs partially blocking the stop sign on Cedar Lane. Can you confirm? Sullivan leaned forward. That's, maybe 2 cars were there. Not maybe, Amara replied. They were. And at that angle, could you clearly see whether my client came to a full stop? He hesitated. I judged it the best I could. Not what I asked. Could you clearly see it? Don't twist my words, kid, he snapped, his tone sharp. Not completely, no. Amara glanced at the judge, noted. She turned back. Let's move to the body cam audio around the 112 mark. Your words were, quote, he's twitchy, probably high. Is that correct? Yes. Did you conduct any field sobriety tests? No. Did you perform a drug screening or request one? No. Amara's voice didn't rise. She didn't look surprised. So, on what basis did you determine he was probably high? Sullivan shrugged, threatening, looking around. Did he ever raise his voice? No. Threaten you? No. Refuse to show ID? No. Amara paused, let the silence drag. She locked eyes with him, her voice cutting through the tension. So, you decided my client was a criminal based on a hunch. So, your conclusion was based solely on him fidgeting? Sullivan started to shift in his seat. Look, I've done this a long time, and my client was stopped, searched, and cited based on your feeling. The courtroom stayed quiet. Sullivan's mouth opened, but no words came out fast enough. Amara continued. Your report also said you observed a bag under the passenger seat and suspected contraband. Correct. But the footage shows you asking what's in the bag without ever pointing a flashlight or crouching down. How did you observe it? I saw something dark under there. A shadow? I assumed it was a bag, but you wrote that you observed a bag. Maybe I was mistaken. Amara let that hang in the air. Maybe you were. Or maybe you wrote what fit your story, she added, her tone still calm but piercing. She walked slowly back to the table, calm, unbothered, like she was taking her time because she could. The prosecutor shuffled papers, but no one was listening to him now. Amara turned again. Officer Sullivan, in your 21 years on the force, have you ever been formally disciplined for misconduct? The room tensed. His jaw moved, but again too slow. Yes, once, 8 years ago. What for? He looked to the prosecutor for help. The judge spoke before either could move. Answer the question, officer. Sullivan let out a breath. Excessive force complaint, it was dropped. Thank you, Amara said, voice still even. Dropped but not erased, she said softly, letting the implication linger. She glanced down at her binder, then up at the gallery. The energy in the room was shifting. People leaned in like they didn't want to miss what came next. But what no one expected was how she'd used Sullivan's own report to show he hadn't just exaggerated. He had broken departmental policy, and he did it all on tape. Officer Sullivan wasn't smiling anymore. His arms were still crossed, but tighter now, jaw clenched. His right knee bounced under the witness stand, a little twitch that gave him away. For the first time, He didn't look like a man in control of the room. Amara stayed steady. She walked back to the center of the courtroom like she was giving a lecture. No rush, no flash, just facts. "I'd like to read a section from the Reno PD Procedural Manual, revised March last year," she said, holding up a printed packet. Section 5.3, Suspicion-Based Stops. She cleared her throat. "All stops based on observed behavior must be clearly articulated and supported by specific actions observed by the officer at the scene. Subjective feelings or instincts are not grounds for initiating a search." She lowered the packet and locked eyes with Sullivan. "You wrote that my client was fidgeting, glancing around, and looked nervous." "Correct. None of those are illegal behaviors, no, and you did not observe a weapon, contraband, or direct threat before initiating the search." "No." She flipped another page. "Yet, in the body cam footage at 3:49 and 8 seconds p.m., you said, quote, 'He fits the type. Always act the same way when they've got something to hide.'" The courtroom didn't breathe for a moment. "Fits the type," Amara repeated, more slowly this time. "That's what you said." Sullivan shifted again. "You meant what?" "Don't play games with me," he growled, his voice rising. "I meant guys who get nervous during stops." "You sure that's all you meant?" she asked, still calm. "Because just a few seconds later you said, 'just like the last kid, jumped like a rabbit when I reached for my belt.'" Sullivan said nothing. Amara looked to the judge. "Your Honor, we're establishing a pattern here. One not supported by department guidelines but by profiling assumption, and a clear violation of Policy 5.3. The judge nodded slowly. "Continue." Amara turned back. "Officer Sullivan, are you familiar with case number K308 from 8 months ago?" "Same precinct," he frowned. "Refresh my memory." "You stopped another young black man. Similar neighborhood. Similar phrasing in your report. Twitchy. Glanced around. Looked like he had something to hide." She held up 2 documents. "The language is nearly identical." He didn't respond. "Did you detain that young man?" "Yes." "Was anything illegal found?" "No." "Was a complaint filed?" "Yes." "But was it dropped?" "No." The room got real still again. Amara looked down at her notes, then up. "Is it standard for you to repeat descriptions across different incidents when the behavior isn't illegal and no violation has occurred?" "I don't know," he mumbled. Amara stepped back. "You don't know?" "You're putting words in my mouth," he snapped, his face reddening. Sullivan took a breath. "Maybe I rely on pattern recognition." Amara tilted her head. "That's not what the department calls it," he raised his voice now, just a bit. "Look, sometimes you get a feel for who's hiding something." There it was. She waited for the air to settle. "I believe we covered this, officer," she said plainly. "Your department policy doesn't accept feelings as a reason for a search." He said nothing. Amara turned and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, it's clear the stop lacked legal grounds. The officer not only misrepresented his line of sight, but also used subjective language with no supporting behavior. This isn't about being a veteran on the force. It's about accountability." She paused, her voice dropping slightly. "And it's about making sure no one else has to sit in my client's seat because of someone's unchecked bias." Judge Harrington nodded, but his expression gave away nothing. Amara returned to the defense table and sat down. No one clapped. No one had to. The silence said everything. Sullivan stared at her now. No more smirks, no more side comments, just the realization that she'd walked him into every trap, using nothing but his own words, policy, and footage. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the stand, the weight of her questions sinking in. But the part that shook the courtroom wasn't the contradictions. It was what Amara did next with just one question, and how that single sentence rewrote the case. Amara didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't even stand back up. She just sat there, flipping through one last page in her binder, then asked the question that froze the entire courtroom. "Officer Sullivan, did you know my client is a high school science teacher at Lincoln Middle?" His head jerked back slightly. "No." "You didn't ask?" "No." "Did you ask him where he was coming from or going to?" "No." "Didn't seem relevant." Amara let that sit for a second. Not relevant, she repeated, her voice sharp for the first time. You didn't think it was relevant to know who he was before you decided he was a threat? So to be clear, the stop, the search, and the citation were all based on a rolling stop you couldn't clearly see, a bag you didn't identify, and a twitch you assumed meant he was hiding something. All without asking him a single question about where he was coming from or who he was. Sullivan shifted. That's not exactly, but it is, she cut in, gently but firmly. You saw a young black man in a hoodie driving a used Camry and decided the story for him. He said nothing. You didn't ask, you didn't wonder, you didn't think. Maybe this guy had a long day teaching 8th graders how to balance chemical equations. You thought he fits the type, and that was all you needed. That's not fair, Sullivan muttered, his voice low but defensive. She turned to the judge again. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for truth. This case isn't about a stop sign. It's about assumptions, lazy ones, harmful ones. The judge didn't respond. He didn't have to. Amara stood up finally and addressed the gallery. Every inch of this courtroom runs on rules, legal procedure, evidence, discipline. So how is it that a man in uniform can toss that all aside because of a feeling and expect the rest of us not to notice? No one said a word. She turned to Officer Sullivan one last time. You've been doing this job 21 years, but what scares me most is how confident you were that no one would question the way you wrote that report. How certain you were that no one would hold you to your own department's standards. You don't know what it's like out there. Sullivan blurted, his voice cracking with frustration. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Hayes, you've made your point. She gave a short nod. No further questions, Your Honor. Sullivan stared ahead. His hands were gripping the edge of the stand now. There was no smirk, no chuckle, just quiet. Amara returned to her seat. Her co-counsel leaned toward her, whispered, "That was lethal." She didn't smile. Instead, she whispered back, "It was overdue." She glanced at her client, whose eyes were fixed on her with a mix of awe and relief, and gave him a small nod. Behind them in the gallery, someone let out a low whistle. The prosecutor asked to redirect, but barely managed a few questions before the judge waved it off. "Move to closing arguments," Judge Harrington said. His tone was flat, but his eyes said everything. But while the court prepared to wrap, the energy in that room had already shifted because everyone knew Amara hadn't just dismantled a case. She exposed a system, quietly, cleanly, completely. Closing arguments were supposed to be the dramatic part, but Amara had already done the damage, not with speeches, not with outrage, but with evidence. Her closing wasn't about fireworks, it was about focus. She stood slowly, took a sip of water, and looked directly at the jury. "When you watched that body cam footage," she said, "you didn't see a threat. You saw a teacher driving home. You saw a man cooperate. You saw no search warrant, no probable cause. You saw words that were meant to sound professional but fell apart under pressure." She paused, her voice softening. "You saw a man's life turned upside down because someone decided he didn't deserve the benefit of a question." She let that land. "Now, let's talk about what you didn't see," she added. "You didn't see a man resisting. You didn't see a traffic violation. You didn't see any sign of criminal behavior. All you saw, and all Officer Sullivan needed, was a feeling." Amara paused, then walked slowly toward the jury box. "Feelings aren't evidence." She looked toward Officer Sullivan, then back at the jury. "Feelings don't give you permission to rewrite facts. They don't justify skipping questions, skipping protocol, or skipping basic respect. They don't justify humiliating a man who spends his days shaping young minds," she added, her voice steady but heavy with conviction. She turned toward the judge briefly, then to the gallery. "My client was profiled, humiliated, and cited because someone didn't bother to ask who he was before deciding what he was." Another beat. "And the most disturbing part? If we weren't here today, if we didn't have footage, policy, records, and this platform, none of this would matter. It would just be another closed file with $150 0 cents fine and no explanation." She walked back to her table. "This case isn't about winning. It's about telling the truth, and making sure someone finally listens to it. She glanced at Sullivan, her eyes unflinching. And it's about making sure the next officer thinks twice before assuming they're untouchable. She sat down. The prosecutor followed. His closing was brief, dry. Nothing landed. The words fell into the air and disappeared before they reached the jury. Amara didn't even look at him. Her client, Mr. Jamal Carter, turned to her, whispered, "You think we've got a shot?" Amara looked him in the eye. "They heard you," she said. "That's more than most people get." The jury didn't take long. 65 minutes after deliberation began, they returned. The 4 persons stood. "We find the defendant not guilty of all charges." A wave passed through the room. Some people gasped. Others sat stunned. Sullivan didn't move. He stared forward, like the moment hadn't fully landed yet. His face paled, and for the first time he looked small, like the weight of his own words had finally crushed him. The judge spoke again. "Charges are dismissed. Court is adjourned." Amara shook Jamal's hand, then his shoulder. He just stood there blinking. "Thank you," he said, voice cracking. "I thought this was going to bury me." Amara smiled for the first time that day. "You're standing. That means they lost." She leaned closer, her voice soft but firm. "You're more than what they tried to make you." She packed her binder slowly. No rush, no victory dance, just a deep breath and a quiet moment. People were already whispering as she walked down the aisle about her age, her delivery, her calm. Nobody was making jokes anymore, not even Sullivan. He stood in the back of the courtroom, hands on his hips, watching her leave like he wasn't sure if he should be mad or relieved. Amara pushed open the heavy courtroom door and walked into the sun. Outside, a small crowd of local reporters waited. One of them stepped forward. "Miss Hayes? Amara, how does it feel to win a case like this at your age?" Amara didn't even pause. "I'm not here to feel good," she said. "I'm here to make things right." Her voice carried an edge, a quiet fury that made the reporter step back. The reporter stammered, trying to come up with a better question. Amara kept walking, but what she didn't know yet was that the clip of her closing argument had already hit social media, and by sunset the entire country would know her name. By 7:19 p.m., the clip had passed 320,000 views on X. Someone in the gallery had recorded Amara's closing argument. The caption was simple: "She's 20, he's been a cop for 21 years, guess who came prepared?" The replies flooded in. I've never seen someone undress a case like that without raising their voice. This is what real courtroom power looks like. Who is she? We need her running for DA in 10 years. At a cafe 3 blocks from the Washoe County Courthouse, Amara sat across from Jamal Carter, who was still holding his untouched coffee. His hands hadn't stopped shaking, not because he was scared, but because the adrenaline hadn't fully left his body. "I thought they were going to find some way to spin it," he said. "I've never seen anyone handle cops like that, not even older lawyers." Amara stirred her tea slowly. "It's not about handling them, it's about cornering them with their own words." Jamal laughed, more from relief than humor. "You've done this before." "Only twice in person," she said. "Rest were pro bono consults, Zoom stuff." He blinked. "That's crazy," she shrugged. "I read fast." Just then her phone buzzed again. More notifications. Her name was now trending in Nevada. Someone had posted a stitched clip comparing her to the prosecutor side by side. One sounding like a robot, the other like a razor blade. She silenced her phone. "I don't care about going viral," she said quietly. "I care about the people who'll never get a day in court, like you." Jamal leaned back. What does happen next? Amara looked him dead in the eye. Nothing. And that's the problem. That officer goes back to work. The department says it was a misunderstanding. People move on until the next one. Jamal nodded slowly. "So why keep doing it?" Amara sat forward. "Because every time I win one of these, it gets harder for the next cop to lie, and easier for the next person to fight back." She paused, her voice softening. "And because I know what it's like to be seen as less than what you are." Outside, more cameras were starting to gather. The courthouse press team had already requested a quote from her. She declined. She had nothing more to say, at least not to them. That night, her email inbox filled with requests, podcasts, news interviews, school boards asking her to speak, but Amara didn't respond right away. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted people to do their jobs right and stop expecting her to fix what they kept breaking. Across town, Officer Sullivan sat at a bar in silence, watching the clip of himself on someone else's phone screen. "Didn't she burn you up in court today?" the bartender asked, half laughing. Sullivan didn't answer. He just finished his drink and left a $10.00 tip. His hands shook as he set the glass down, the weight of his career unraveling in his mind. The next morning, the Reno Police Department issued a statement. "We take all public concerns seriously and will be conducting a formal review of the incident involving Officer Sullivan. We remain committed to community accountability and professional conduct." Amara read the statement on her phone while sitting in her room. She shook her head and muttered, "Cut and paste." Her mom peeked through the doorway. "You good?" she asked. Amara smiled. "Yeah, just thinking." "You're all over the news," her mom said, proud and protective at the same time. "I saw your clip on Instagram. Even Aunt Tina's group chat is going wild." Amara laughed a little. "It's a weird day." Her mom leaned against the doorframe. "You want dinner?" "Maybe later." Alone again, Amara opened her binder and turned to a blank page. She titled it, "Future Cases, What We Missed Today." But the truth was, even as she tried to move on, something had changed. Not just in the courtroom, but in the eyes of every person who once doubted whether she belonged there in the first place. Tuesday morning came fast. The courthouse buzzed early, not with drama, but with attention. People wanted to see her, the girl in the oversized blazer and sneakers who wiped the floor with a 21-year cop like she'd done it 100 times. But Amara wasn't there. She was back at her apartment near the University of Nevada, Reno, sitting on her small gray couch, eating cereal out of a mug and flipping through her handwritten notes. No music, no TV, just the sound of her spoon tapping the ceramic. Her phone vibrated again. Another text. This one read, "Saw the vid. That was fire. I owe you one." It was from a guy she helped 3 months ago, wrongfully arrested for fitting the description. The case never made it to trial, but Amara tore through the report and got it dismissed in less than a week. She never asked for thanks, just the facts. Her inbox had 204 unread messages. Some reporters, some clients, some high school girls who said she gave them hope. She opened one. It was from a woman in Carson City, a mother. "My daughter wants to go to law school now. She watched your closing 5 times. She said, 'I didn't know we were allowed to talk like that in court. Thank you.'" Amara closed the email and sat still for a minute. It wasn't about praise. It never was. But she knew what that feeling was, watching someone who looks like you do something you were told wasn't for you. She thought of her own teenage years, mocked by teachers who said she'd never make it to law school, and felt a fire reignite in her chest. She picked up her phone, finally replying to a reporter who'd asked her what it felt like to win. She typed, "It doesn't feel like a win until the system stops giving officers like Sullivan the benefit of the doubt and starts giving people like Jamal the benefit of the truth." Then she hit send. Across town at the department headquarters, Officer Sullivan's body cam footage was under official review. It wasn't just about one case anymore. It was his language, his patterns, his record. Suddenly, all the things he thought no one would ever care about were being analyzed line by line. By Thursday, he was placed on administrative leave. No press conference, no applause, just a quiet exit. Meanwhile, Amara sat in a classroom of high school juniors at a youth legal program in Sparks, leading a workshop called What They Can't Teach You in Law School. She wore a t-shirt, jeans, and a pair of clean white sneakers. "You're going to walk into rooms where people think you don't belong," she told them. "Don't waste time proving them wrong. Prove yourself right." One student raised her hand. "How do you stay calm when they laugh at you?" Amara smiled. "Because they laugh when they feel safe. I don't give them that." The class went quiet. Then one boy whispered, "That's cold." Amara grinned. It's justice. It's just dressed different. She paused, her voice softening. And it's worth it when you see someone walk free because you didn't back down. Later that night, back at home, she took a moment to breathe. She looked out the window, lights flickering across campus buildings. She didn't want fame. She wanted change. But if people were going to keep watching, she'd give them something real to watch. No theatrics, no sound bites, just truth. And one hard rule she'd already written in permanent ink: never underestimate the one person in the room with something to prove and nothing to lose. Sometimes the people who laugh at you are just scared of what you already know. You don't need to shout, you just need to show up prepared and let the truth do the rest. If this story made you feel something, share it, speak it, challenge what's normal, because silence never changed anything. But courage backed by knowledge, that's where justice starts.